It established our national government and our fundamental laws and guaranteed us certain basic rights more than 200 years ago. But has the U.S. Constitution become outdated? Georgetown University constitutional law professor Louis Michael Seidman says yes, it has, while constitutional attorney David Rivkin disagrees. They both join us from Washington. Professor Seidman, thanks for coming on. The Constitution is useful, it seems to me, because it guarantees us certain rights regardless of who's in power. Do you really think that we'd have the freedom of speech, for example, without the Bill of Rights?
Tucker, first I want to say thank you so much for having me. In the last week, I've gotten over 1,000 abusive emails, many of them anti-Semitic, some of them threatening, and so it's really a pleasure to be able to have a conversation that's sensible and calm about this. So the basic idea is this. Americans don't like other people telling them what they have to believe just because those other people claim to be better than they are. So we wouldn't be happy being ruled by the French or the British or by the UN or by a bunch of fancy pants law professors. And there's no reason why we should be ruled by a very small number of people who've been dead for over 200 years, who didn't even represent the United States at the time they were alive, the majority. So with regard to free speech, of course we should have free speech. But we should have free speech because free speech is valuable. I know that. I've been taking advantage of it for the last few days. Here's an argument that's not a good argument for free speech. We ought to have free speech because James Madison 200 years ago thought we ought to have free speech.
Now, Mr. Rivkin, can you think, I mean, countries, civilized countries, Great Britain, for example, Canada, neither one has freedom of speech enshrined in a constitution or a Bill of Rights, and neither one has free speech. You can be imprisoned in both those countries for saying unpopular things. Is that not true?
They have different approach to freedom of speech. But let me say this, Tucker. There are two different issues that my good friend Professor Seidman has engaged. One is the particular mode of governance that's reflected in the Constitution that features not just provisions in the Bill of Rights, but the diffusion of power, both vertically between states and the federal government and horizontally among the free branches of the federal government, the right way to proceed. And let's stipulate that the framers created this diffusion of power because they believe that no matter how compelling the exigencies of a moment may be, the best way to protect individual liberty, frankly, is to have a very cramped, confined government. The second issue is the Constitution, as it stands now, embodies the perfect balance? Well, the answer to the first question, I think, is yes. I think the Constitution is a brilliant instrument. It continues to be relevant to the 21st century. But second, we don't need to engage in extra constitutional hand-throwing. Article 5 of the Constitution provides for opportunities to amend it, both by specific amendments and constitutional convention.
Yes.
And we now have 27 amendments in the book. So I'm not sure why Professor Seidman does not understand the proposition the Constitution contains the processes, the procedures for its own amendments.
Well,
we don't have to say the heck of
for
it.
its own
Let's start
overthrow,
from scratch.
In fact, Professor, very quickly, if you would, without a constitution, wouldn't each administration, each political administration, just make up the rules anew every time?
No. Great Britain, Israel, New Zealand, they don't have written constitutions, and that's not the way they work. We have long traditions in this country, and we're not about to throw them out tomorrow. We're not about to throw them out in part because Mr. Rivkin is right. There's a lot in the Constitution that Americans believe in today, and so we would continue to do those things. There are also, I should say, some really pernicious provisions that almost no Americans believe in today, and that we ought to get rid of.
Gentlemen, I wish we had more time. Thank you very much. That was illuminating.
Thanks, Tucker.
Well, it puts Jersey